Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 7th day of May 2024. And we're concluding on that point about the government response and what your rating has been. Franklin, maybe your closing remarks on that topic.
Yeah. Sam, I think amidst the gloom, I want to appreciate two agencies. One is the Kenya Meteorological Department for being very professional and giving out the alerts, and despite the ridicule by some of these very ignorant politicians, they maintained and warned and made sure that Kenyans were alert. The second one is the Kenya National Highways Authority. If they had not been agile enough to give information, and I'm saying this because I was caught up on the Nairobi, Nakuru, Eldoret highway over the weekend. And that is when Timboroa, the road, the culvert was swept away. And you could see that this is an agency that is determined at least to forewarn, give alerts, and be able. So the public safety and security alerts that those two institutions have contributed to are really, really laudable. In fact, including the way Kenya National Highways Authority has moved in to make sure that the repairs are done. But when you come to how government has responded, I think they would have done better out of the information that they had. But it's down to beyond the money problem that Alex mentions. I think we have seen, particularly this administration, the issue of planning and prioritizing is an issue. If you look at the challenges in tax collection, it's a conversation that Kenyans had for a very long time in the year 2022, 2023 on the tax measures that this administration was putting in place, and experts like Alex weighing in and really saying these are the consequences, likely consequences. Right. So you may come up with a taxation regime that really negatively affects, the ability to collect tax, and that is what we are realizing now. The other thing I would want to mention is look at even the prioritization. We've given 5 billion shillings now in the 2024-2025 budget to the Hustler Fund. The Hustler Fund is struggling with repayment problems. Even before repayment, we're already struggling with disbursement. But still, you're looking at that as a focus. I mean, we must ask this government to plan better and prioritize better. The president went around saying, we're giving you 10,000 shillings to help you over the next 3 months. I mean, if you divide that, that is barely 3,333 shillings. It is much lower than even the affordable housing that his government is pushing. And these are the issues that we're saying, please stop taking advantage of the misfortune of Kenyans and come in with clear plans. Why did it take so long for the government to realize that Mai Mahiu required military intervention so that they can be able to at least rescue people in good time? So we're being told that 229 have lost lives, but on the same breath, you're told that 70 people are still missing. So what are the records? Are we being conservative on the actual numbers to manage Kenyans? And these are things that we must be very angry about. So then Parliament is meeting, which is okay with the standing orders to discuss the impeachment of a CS. Right. But the standing orders talk about precedents. Does the word precedents mean entirely you should focus your business on the impeachment? Or can really this National Assembly and the Senate sit and have a conversation on this national disaster that we have? We know that it's a disaster, but responsiveness is very critical. Finally, I think we need to continue asking Kenyans to shift their culture a bit on two things. Okay. One, when there are security alerts, when there are public safety alerts, please let us abide by that. Right. Again, I was on the highway yesterday morning, and you could see that there are accidents, but Kenyans are still trying to overlap. This poor visibility, it's raining. Police are struggling to control traffic with accidents on the road, but Kenyans are really still trying to compete and get ahead of each other. I think we need to shift our mindset. Finally, our social contracting.
That's the second finally.
Yes. Our social contracting, we have a misnomer in that. When we engage in the kind of politics that we do, where it is about social welfare dispensation and we do not assess the candidates that we put in office, that's where they will take advantage of us. That's why they will call our taxes donations. That's why they will come to take photos with our missaries, you know, and that's why they will want to have sound bites on serious media stations like these ones for the sake of publicity instead of really interventions. I want to ask Kenyans that as we look into our leadership, the idea of social welfare dispensation should be at the communal level, where we're helping each other in terms of funerals, in terms of, you know, weddings, in terms of you know, rurasho and such business. But when it comes to the social contract every 5 years, we must really, really stop this idea of looking at politicians as social welfare dispensers so that we can hold them to account. And when we hold them to account, they will go and do the oversight job, they will go and do the legislative job, and do the representation job.
Frankly, you mentioned something that caught my attention, that we're having challenges with repayment of the Hustler Fund. Would you have the specific status as of now? No,
not really, but if you look at the priorities, and that's the point I'm making, that you have a crisis like this and you're discussing budgets, but still you want to invest in an area that is struggling. First, you're struggling with disbursement as a government for the Hustler Fund. And then when you go to the repayments, there are challenges that you're not able to make the people that are giving the money, the hustlers, at this point, how do you expect them in the midst of this crisis to be able to utilize this money on the intended purposes and be able to repay? So we're going to likely have challenges again in terms of the uptake and in terms of the repayment of those loans. Because this money, you cannot start prioritizing investing your 500 shillings in the selling of sukuma wiki along the road when the road itself is swept out, the kiosk itself is swept out. And it's just not possible to look at our governance in that frame.
Okay, I hear you, because I'm looking at an article here from March 2024. At that time, 49 billion shillings had been lent out to Kenyans, and the repayment rate had been at 37 billion shillings. That's about 71%, but it doesn't mention what the default rate was. Yeah. But anyway, I think that's homework on our side to find out what the real figures are. I want us to transition to the conversation about the IEBC, and we know that since 17th of January, we've not had the commission without a chair, no members of the commission as well. A month later, Irene Masit was removed from office after a tribunal concluded its hearings. But I think as early as December 2022, 3 commissioners resigned after they were required to be investigated by a tribunal. So IEBC for more than 1 year has not been able to execute very crucial responsibilities, whether it's about registration of voters, whether it's about the work that goes to do with conducting by elections or even the boundaries review. And Musawa, I'll begin with you on this one. The cost that Kenyans may not be seeing, the impact of not having an IEBC, yet we are just about slightly over 3 years to the next election.
And it's one of the biggest issues which have been put in some corner somewhere, and we've chosen to forget about it. Let me just put this in context. One is that we need to understand, or at least Kenyans need to understand, that they have what they call an independent agency. That is their trustee to manage electoral processes. And that in this country, we have also elected to ensure that electoral processes are continuous. They don't stop. The conduct of the general elections is an event that happens once every 5 years. But there are a number of other processes that are ongoing. Voter registration goes on. By-elections are held up and when they come up. We already have 2 constituencies which do not have members of parliament. We have a host of county assembly seats which are vacant because, and those are people, as we discussed the crisis, we discussed the people of Lagdera, Banisa, and other places during the discussions of the finance bill. They never had representation. So those are laws which were being passed without them being heard. And that is already a contravention of the rights of Kenyans to be represented, to be heard, to participate in national decisions. And we have had so many other issues which have passed. The key among them, the question of boundary delimitation, which is supposed to be happening every 8 to 12 years. It has been lapsed by time because we never had a commission in place. And lastly, it's a trend. It's been a trend. We saw the previous commission, which was there in 2017, Akombe, the one with Akombe and others. Once 4 of them left office or resigned, we took quite a while and got the Chebukatis about 6 months to the election. Now, we seem to be doing the same thing. So it's the same game that is being played politically. The political elite cannot hold this country and ransom when it comes to an agency that's supposed to be the people's agency. And therefore, even as the discussions about the NADCO report and the import of it and all these other issues, the one issue that needed to be totally outside that process was IEBC. We have a selection panel which was already put in place legally by Parliament. The questions of who was included and not included is neither here nor there. It is the House which passed that. And we need to be very diligent with our laws. If we keep breaking these things, we're not going to have any laws that we can be able to stand on. So we have a panel. I think it was on the 22nd of March, if I'm not wrong, when the High Court ruled that that panel needed to complete its work within 90 days. 90 days are not over, but they're just about to, because I think that comes around June. And after that, now we'll be facing a crisis. The House was given 45 days to discuss the NADCO report. I think we already passed those timelines again because of delays at the House. The discussion was still at the committee stage. The last time I checked, they were supposed to have a committee of the full House. I don't know. We have not got any information whether that has happened so far. So for me, the crisis is we don't have a commission. We don't have people who are being represented. The commission is at limbo. It cannot be able to undertake its tasks. We have a secretariat that's supposed to be guided by the commissioners themselves. They can't do anything. They cannot pass any serious decisions as far as matters to do with elections are concerned. And that, for me, is a crisis. Now, just to, as I wind up and just unpack a few issues which I've seen in the NADCO report, right. We have a boundary delimitation process that is supposed to be happening. The proposal right now is that we're going to have it, the parliamentarians want it to be between 10 and 20 years, which means they can ensure that this boundary delimitation exercise is done even after the 2027 elections. It doesn't speak to the question of representation, the quotas and all those things. Remember, our national census is supposed to help us determine the quota of seats in terms of parliamentary representation. As things stand, nearly about 70 constituencies will be scrapped. So you feel a conspiracy coming from Parliament that let's extend this outside 2027 so some of us do not end up losing areas that we can be able to stand very well for elections. But there are also some very interesting proposals in that NADCO report. It says that, for instance, which is going to affect the timelines, that if it is passed, legal reforms cannot be enacted 18 months to the elections. Right. That leaves us with around 18 months from now, in which we can do any reform on that electoral process. And remember, if IEBC alone, just the constitution of IEBC has taken all this time, what about the electoral reforms that we are talking about? Whether it's about the 2/3 gender issue, how to address it, how to address the campaign financing, and all the other law gaps in the law that we are supposed to be addressing as far as the elections are concerned. 18 months is a very short time for electoral reforms. So basically what we are saying, as my fear and as an election observer, is that we are going to go to that 2027 election without comprehensive reforms being conducted. So we're going to do piecemeal. They're talking about having a voter register redone. Voter registration is another big problem in this country. You start on that process like the boundary review. how much time we're going to take with this, the arguments, the pros and cons. We are going to take more than 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. The IEBC, in this 18 months, the IEBC comes in, it's not coming, it starts eating into that 18 months, its reconstitution. It has to be inducted so that it can start its job. So I can't see IEBC being ready to conduct electoral processes in 2024. It will start in 2025 someplace. That is, of course, given we are going to sort out the issue of IEBC. But I'm also hoping, as my last point, that the High Court ruling, which set a deadline for 90 days. It
was actually 1st of February.
1st of February. So we're looking at the end of this month. It should be the end of this month.
So because you had 29 days in February, you had 31 in March, you had 30. It must actually be beyond the deadline of 90 days, as you say.
No, are we? No, not yet.
Yes.
It was
1st of February, March, April. Oh, yes. So we're already now in a crisis. Basically, we are saying that we are in a crisis. I don't know why I was thinking about the end of May, but yes, you're right. Yeah. So we are looking at a crisis. We're looking at a crisis because a court order is again ignored. So that's where we are.
And of course, there's a bill that is at the National Assembly being considered. It was in the order paper for Thursday to go to the Committee of the Whole House, where they are going to consider amendments to it. And they're quite far-reaching, including setting the procedure of boundaries review. Quite elaborate.
Yes.
I'm just concerned whether we've had the sufficient public participation, because this is an important issue that really affects a lot of things in this country. And Alex, I don't know what your thoughts are, because we appear to be very certain when it comes to collection of resources, whether it's passing a Finance Act, whether it's passing a budget to guide on the expenditure. We also rush to pass supplementary budgets to see how to reorganize resources based on eventualities that come. But on the important issues of determining the future of a country, like IEBC, like the people of Banisa and other wards who do not have representation, we are not quick to respond to that. What shall we do?
Interesting. Should we prioritize floods now, or should we start with the IEBC? I think on this issue of IEBC, I go back to how we got into the NADCO. We had a Sufuria revolution. Guys were throwing stones everywhere. And for us to kind of bring this country into some form of order, we got into this NADCO report and all these plans around delimitation and IEBC and stuff like that. So I think the government managed to buy time, and they're still buying the time. I don't know up to when, but it is quite important that people are properly represented. The constituencies that don't have their MPs should get their MPs. MCAs who are not there should be actually getting there, so that people are represented, because that's their right under our constitution, to ensure that they have proper representation. I would understand why the government would, for example, prioritize things around taxes and budget, because if you then don't have that, then the whole government fails. So it's more or less saying we could sacrifice, in a wrong way, if I could say it, some of the things and prioritize what perhaps is more urgent according to them.
Wow. And don't you think, I mean, that is serious, because yes, we have to prioritize because government has to keep running. But even when the documents are passed, the resources are not available. I'm just wondering, why aren't we able to realize how important the question of IEBC is? Because the people that are in Parliament to pass those laws, they're in Parliament because IEBC existed to facilitate that process. If we are not quick to fix the question of boundaries review, then we're looking at disenfranchising as some people in this country.
But before you answer that, if I could just put another rejoinder to what you said, is you know, when you say purpose, having to prioritize issues about fundraising, IEBC had its own quota or it was budgeted for. We have a commission. It's one of the legitimate agencies in this country. Right. So procrastination about having it in place does not affect the funds. The funds for IEBC and its functions, maybe the limitation itself, maybe that would be outside a little bit in terms of whether they had that money already. But I remember Chebukati in the last, before the last election, he said they had gotten money to deal with the boundaries, and they are just they are put in the budget of the last electoral period because it's supposed to start in 2020, that process. And they are done over 2/3 of it. I mean, what was left was to go to the constituencies and have a conversation with the people. So I'm just saying, in terms of the prioritization of money, we're not really saying that IEBC, all these things cannot actually be able to go on simultaneously. You can have, you can prioritize issues about fundraising and looking for money in terms of taxation, but we do have budgets, unless they are being moved to handle issues to do with IEBC. So there's no contradiction in terms of having IEBC being prioritized.
And squarely, Alex, as you get back to that, squarely, it is the role of Parliament to put in law, because if the first selection panel had a problem, then it's up to Parliament to review the law. It's taken quite a bit of time.
Yes, and unfortunately, I think we've been here for some time. We know that Parliament sometimes looks after its own interests. In as much as they are our representatives, they also have their own interests, and I'll give you one. So when we had an increase in terms of taxes, the higher PAYE rate, adding housing levy and stuff, they were quick to cushion themselves through some additional income or revenue so that at least they could take care of additional taxes. So when, for example, Mule says that through this NADCO report, some constituencies will be removed, surely, are we expecting them to prioritize that, surely? Vis-a-vis perhaps waiting it, a little bit longer so that it becomes someone else's problem. Like you say, from 2027, it's someone else's problem, it's not theirs. But we have a role to play. Even the civil society has a role to play. Parliamentarians also have a role to play because we put them there to pass laws and ensure that the rule of the law is actually followed. Right. So when you have a decision made by a judge or the judiciary and then they don't kind of follow it, then it's time perhaps they're called out. Okay. So that maybe they look at it differently.
Okay. All right. I want us to take a look at the feedback that has come to us. But before we do that, Diana, so what are your thoughts about this? Because it appears that we are not moving.
Do we want to move? I doubt. I think, and Alex has indicated that the NADCO report emanated from, say, the demonstration. But allow me to go to the first memo or, executive memo that the president presented to Parliament. And for me, that is what kick-started the NADCO process. In that particular process is where their proposals...
The bipartisan talks?
No, the memo, the presidential memo.
The presidential memo that had four issues. The first one was that then cabinet secretary should be able to address Parliament, a leader of opposition, to that gender role, and anchor the national government CDF in the law. All these are reforms that would need a constitutional. They must be accompanied by constitutional amendments. For me, that is what NADCO is about. But they are the bait, because we are speaking about legislators' interests. Yep. Every member of Parliament would pass a law that finally alters the design and architecture of the Constitution, where there are only two organs that are fundable: national government executive and county government executive. You alter that, and everybody knows they have secured NGCDF, which currently has been declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. What we still do not know is what is the real reform that the political patrons want. Until that is synthesized, will take some time. With the NADCO laws, the NADCO processes, the boundaries, it's not a very big issue. We can talk about it.
In 2028.
Yes, and we can even postpone it. After all, when did we finally get our boundaries? 2010? Since 2012, since when? We would add a few constituency. This is a small issue. A few people are not represented. There are still other organs that are functioning. So there are certain political interests that we are not yet, we can't touch. And I had hoped that they would do this during the truce between the president and Raila Odinga.
And now?
I'm not sure what will happen now. that I'm not sure whether the brotherhood is still ongoing. But even while raising that, the place of electoral reforms and constituting the IEBC is critical. Why we are still playing ping pong with it is unfortunate. It's truly, truly unfortunate. And I hope that I get very disappointed by Parliament, because it still feels like they're taking orders from the executive. And part of these reforms are to take us back to a parliamentary system of government. I am never sure that Parliament understands their power. We should never have gone to Bomas, because after Bomas, we have to come and discuss 45 days, 90 days. Parliament has all the power, and they have all the mechanisms to do all the consultation, follow the constitution. If they want to make amendments, let them drive the amendments through Parliament. Thereafter, tell IEBC we are starting to collect signature. But how they keep being held hostage by executive is at the heart of the problem that we have currently. So I have not personally engaged with proposed reforms to our electoral landscape, but my colleagues here, Mule guides me, and he has not yet sounded the alarm. So I'm assuming the drafting is right, but the interest is not yet clear.
Okay. Yeah. Franklin, what are your thoughts?
Sam, this country's political stability and inclusive, sustainable development is intricately joined at the hip. And therefore cannot put the issues of timely reconstituting of IEBC at the back burner, because we lose about, in my view, 2.5 years of the 5-year term, because we quarrel on IEBC, and everything, and election. By the time we settle and have some artificial handshake and call each other nice names, and then we go back to our usual behavior, we lose a lot of time. And that's why it's very important that as we focus on our economic well-being, political stability, that is also leads to social cohesion is very critical. And IEBC is a very critical instrument in that. Having said that, I'm a little bit disappointed in the electoral reform discussion. The very critical issue of the political, operational, and institutional challenges of IEBC seem to be taking a back burner. And looking at the report of the committee, JELA committee by Chair Mrugara, dismissing the input by the judiciary as general, when they're actually looking at responding to the issues of the Supreme Court, especially in terms of the policy and administrative remit of IEBC is very critical. What are the responsibilities of the chair vis-a-vis the commissioners and the staff? Because this is where the boardroom rupture happens. And putting those things behind and saying they are general and they are not very clear on how to fix them, then we're not responding to the actual problems that bedevil IEBC. The concentration of expanding the panel, I mean, all of us have been through job interviews. Can you imagine facing a 9-member panel? And I can't understand how you're saying you have two representatives from the Parliamentary Service Commission, from the majority and minority party, then you move on this other end and say, again, you have some formula of finding some political parties to... Yes, elections, the biggest beneficiaries are political parties and the largest stakeholders, but we need to find a formula of a lean, inclusive process of recruiting commissioners and having them in office in good time so that we can adequately prepare for elections and safeguard this country from the upheavals that we have every election. And it's unfortunate that we continue procrastinating on this. And the biggest issue actually is what my sister has pointed out. When business of parliament is transacted elsewhere and not in the House, I think it's a little bit disappointing. And we have not seen the National Assembly and the Senate and mature to the level that we would want to see, that there is a level of independence for them to be able to properly do their work of oversight, representation, and legislation. We have wasted a lot of time going round and round. It is time that we fixed IEBC. It is time that we sorted out the challenges that the Supreme Court has continuously put out, and the many cases that civil society organizations and individual Kenyans have moved to court to seek interpretation of those challenges.
And of course, part of the amendments that are proposed in the law being considered by Parliament is to make sure that IEBC is able, let me just read it out, the Commission shall, after every general election, review its operations and make the necessary changes required to make its operations more efficient, effective, transparent, and accountable. But there's a proposed amendment by the Member of Parliament for Kinangop, Zachary Thuku, who wants to make sure that after an election, after a general election, the IEBC shall appoint an independent committee to review the operations of the Commission. And that committee shall have membership like what would appear to be in the selection panel. So selection panel comes to recruit the commissioners. After an election, the Commission recruits an independent committee that looks like the selection panel to review its own work.
But do you read the contradiction in whatever you're just saying?
He has presented it very well.
Yes, that you have an independent commission, which also appoints another independent committee to oversee, to oversight some of the, to look at to review the operations of IEBC. That is a total contradiction. You know, the idea of an independent commission is basically to do that. It's supposed to be the public trustee.
Right.
That the secretariat does the work. Remember, the work which is done by the secretariat. The technical people are the secretariat. And they will do the elections around the country. It is that commission that goes through a public vetting process that is entrusted to ensure that the elections are credible. So when you raise that, it's basically like saying that trust that the public has placed on you is on quicksand. Basically, because why do you then go again and look for another committee to be able to do this? It's supposed to be an operational issue for IEBC. Once an election is over, do a thorough review. You want to invite an independent agency to come and help you in terms of the work, we have no problem with that. But that's the way to go. You can't have another misuse of public resources. And basically entrenching the problem of public trust in these agencies. Basically, we are moving it forward.
And one can only hope that Kenyans are paying attention because some of the things that are happening in Parliament can be very significant or very consequential in the future. I want us to take a look at the feedback that has come to us before we transition to the last topic of the morning. At Citizen TV Kenya, Samgichuku, the hashtag to use is Debre Kora Kenyan saying this morning. We have Engineer Lazaro saying, reconstitution of IEBC seems to be the main secret weapon of the ruling regime. Opposition needs to remove the obstacles and start engaging their colleagues in the ruling regime to start meaningful conversations before crisis hits us. Ole Shonko, as a country, we are known on how reactive we are to important issues. Look at the IEBC issue, doctor strike, flooding, and so on. In all this, there has to be a court order for various institutions to take action. Sisi ni wale wale. Did you say court order to take action?
Yeah.
Or not?
Or not.
Yeah.
Babu Michael is saying that this issues around IBC, this issue around IBC isn't much about electoral laws and other amendments. It's much about finding persons of goodwill and proper integrity to hold those posts. People who can't be easily manipulated and swayed to give faulty election results. Okay. Sam Masika, you're saying the government of Kenya is obligated to protect lives. The reactionary response to issues isn't good. The warning was early. Some counties should not be inhabited but left for conservation due to perennial disaster. Nature is an equalizer for the rich and poor. That's a drastic proposal there. Brian Chamo, you're saying the reliance on public donations indicates a shortfall in preparedness and resource allocation. Vulnerable communities bear the brunt of these shortcomings as they are left to fend for themselves without adequate support from the state. These are some of the sentiments that you're sharing with us this morning. And in our last topic, I want us to pay some attention because the next few weeks to months will be very crucial for